Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. What happens when aliens land on what they assume is a planet ready for colonization and find us humans already there? Let's get into the story. Aldari vessel, Hope's Dawn, sliced through the velvet darkness of space, a beacon of silver and light against the backdrop of a million burning stars. Within its sleek, metallic heart, Reese stared intently at the holographic projection dominating the bridge. It shimmered, a vibrant sphere of greens and blues, a promise whispered across light years. Atheria, he murmured, tracing the curve of the planet with his long, nimble fingers. It was breathtaking, even more so than the preliminary scans had suggested. Lush continents sprawled across its surface, embraced by swirling oceans that glittered like scattered jewels. An entire planet, untouched, teeming with potential. This, my friends, is a new beginning. Svana, her crimson uniform a stark contrast against the cool blue glow of the console, snorted. Don't get ahead of yourself, Reese. Untouched is a relative term. Let's not forget the debacle on Cygnus 7. Those life forms may have been primitive, but they certainly knew how to defend their little puddles. Reese suppressed a sigh. Svana possessed a pragmatic, almost ruthless streak that grated against his own idealistic nature. This is different, Svana. Our scans showed no signs of advanced civilizations, no technological signatures. It's a clean slate. A low chuckle from behind them drew their attention. Marius, a youthful spring in his step, approached the holographic display, his eyes wide with wonder. Just imagine, Captain, to be the first to set foot on a world like this, to explore its mysteries, to catalog its wonders. Reese smiled, heartened by the young engineer's enthusiasm. It mirrored his own, the driving force that had led them across the galaxy. The Valdari, driven by a restless spirit and an insatiable thirst for knowledge, had long turned their gaze towards the stars, seeking new worlds to explore and, if deemed suitable, claim as their own. Indeed, Marius, Reese agreed, his gaze sweeping over the holographic image, each detail imprinting itself upon his memory. A blank canvas upon which we can paint a new future, a future free from the mistakes of the past. He turned back to the control panel, his fingers dancing across the interface. The Hope's Dawn hummed in response, its powerful engines adjusting their trajectory, drawing them inexorably closer to the alluring blue planet. Prepare the landing parties, Reese commanded, his voice resonating with quiet authority. We have much to explore. As the Hope's Dawn pierced through Etheria's atmosphere, a silent promise echoed within its metallic heart. But down below, amidst the whispering forests and ancient ruins, a different story was about to unfold, one that would challenge their assumptions and force them to confront the true meaning of discovery. Unbeknownst to the Valdari, they were not arriving on a barren planet ripe for the taking. They were stepping onto a world already claimed, a world teeming with life, history, and a people determined to protect their own. Sunlight filtered through a canopy woven from leaves older than human history, painted emerald and gold patterns onto the forest floor. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth, a symphony of life humming beneath the surface of rustling leaves and creaking branches. Elias, his bow slung effortlessly across his back, moved with the natural grace of someone born and raised within the embrace of the whispering woods. His hand brushed against the rough bark of a towering oak, a silent greeting to a familiar friend. You're brooding again. A voice sharp and familiar as the call of a hawk sliced through the tranquility. Elias stifled a sigh. Leave it to Corva to pinpoint his every mood shift with unnerving accuracy. She emerged from behind the oak, her dark braids swinging in rhythm with her strides, a smirk playing on her lips. I wasn't brooding, he countered, though the argument lacked his usual conviction. You wear your worry like a second skin. Elias, she retorted, her eyes as green as the forest depths shimmering with amusement. What snagged your thoughts this time? The upcoming harvest? Or perhaps you're composing a sonnet to your favorite oak tree? Elias couldn't help but crack a smile. Corva had a knack for pulling him back from the brink of his own thoughts, a skill honed through years of shared adventures and quiet understanding. Just thinking about Jet's stories, he admitted, his gaze drifting towards the distant peaks that cradled their settlement. The ones about the others. The ones who came from the sky. Corva's playful demeanor faded, replaced by a familiar seriousness. Their people, nestled within the heart of the Whispering Woods, had long passed down tales of a world beyond their own, a world of metal birds and blazing skies, stories that spoke of both wonder and a deep, abiding fear. Jet's stories are just that, Corva said, her voice laced with a conviction she didn't quite feel. Stories meant to remind us of the past, not predict the future. But what if they are more than stories? Elias countered, his gaze drawn to a patch of disturbed earth near the base of a towering redwood. Footprints large and unfamiliar marred the soft soil. What if Jet's warnings have come to pass? Corva followed his gaze, her brow furrowing. The footprints were unlike anything she'd encountered before, too large and oddly spaced to belong to any creature native to the Whispering Woods. A shiver, primal and instinctive, ran down her spine. "We should return to the village," she said, her voice losing its usual playful lilt. "Alert the others." Elias nodded, his hand instinctively reaching for the hunting knife sheathed at his side. Even as he did so, he couldn't shake the feeling that a line had been crossed, an invisible threshold breached. The stories of the others, once relegated to the realm of cautionary tales, now pulsed with a chilling immediacy. The Whispering Woods, for so long their sanctuary, suddenly felt fragile, vulnerable. They were no longer alone. The sunken city of Eldoria basked in the afternoon sun, its skeletal towers casting long, jagged shadows across the plains. What was once a testament to architectural grandeur now lay draped in emerald vines, crumbling stone a canvas for time's relentless artistry. It was a place both beautiful and melancholy, a haunting reminder of the ephemeral nature of even the grandest creations. To the humans of the Whispering Woods, Eldoria was sacred ground, a bridge to a past shrouded in myth and memory. To Reese, gazing out from the viewport of the newly constructed Valdari outpost, it was an intriguing puzzle, a treasure trove of knowledge waiting to be unlocked. "Astonishing, isn't it?" he remarked, gesturing towards the holographic projections that flickered to life around the command center. Topographical maps, atmospheric readings, and spectral analyses swirled in a mesmerizing dance of data. The city's layout, the materials used, there's evidence of sophisticated engineering, of a civilization far more advanced than we initially anticipated. Savannah, her posture rigid, her gaze fixed on the city below, didn't share his enthusiasm. "Advanced enough to pose a threat?" she countered, her tone clipped. Reese frowned, her words leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. "Savannah, we've been over this. Our scans showed no signs of any advanced life forms. These ruins are centuries old, possibly millennia. Whatever civilization resided here is long gone. And yet, we find our outposts inconvenienced." Savannah pressed, her eyes narrowing. She was referring to a series of incidents that had plagued their initial attempts to establish a foothold around Eldoria. Equipment malfunctions, sensor interference, and most unsettling of all, fleeting glimpses of figures moving with impossible speed and agility through the ruins. "Minor setbacks," Reese dismissed, though even he couldn't ignore the unease that prickled at the edges of his confidence. "Technical difficulties easily explained. We are dealing with unknown terrain, after all." Marius, hovering near the back of the command center, couldn't shake off the feeling of eyes on his back. He had been excited about the mission, eager to contribute his skills as an engineer to the establishment of their new home. But the recent events, the whispers of shadows and sabotage, had cast a pall over his initial enthusiasm. He glanced at the latest sensor logs displayed on a nearby console. Anomalies, the reports labeled them. Unexplained energy signatures clustering around the city's perimeter, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. "Captain," he began, his voice hesitant, "I've been analyzing the sensor readings from the perimeter. The anomalies. They seem to be concentrated around specific locations, points of historical significance according to the data we've gathered on Eldorian architecture." Reese turned, his brow furrowed. "Go on?" Marius took a deep breath, emboldened by Reese's genuine interest. "It's just a theory, sir, but what if these anomalies aren't malfunctions or natural phenomena? What if they're deliberate attempts to deter us?" A tense silence descended upon the command center. The hum of the Valdari technology seemed to amplify the weight of his words. Savannah scoffed, her skepticism evident in every syllable. "Deter us? You're suggesting these primitives, these ghosts, are capable of disrupting our technology? Reese, however, surprised them both. He stepped closer to the console, his gaze intent on the swirling data streams. An intriguing possibility, Marius, he mused, a hint of respect coloring his tone, one that warrants further investigation. He was a scientist at heart, driven by curiosity and a thirst for understanding. The possibility of encountering a civilization that had found a way to integrate itself so seamlessly with its environment, a civilization capable of challenging their technological superiority, was more enticing than threatening. "Dispatch a reconnaissance team to Sector Gamma," he ordered, his gaze sweeping across the holographic projection of the sunken city. "I want to know more about these anomalies." He didn't notice the uneasy glances exchanged between Svanna and Marius, the shared sense of foreboding that settled over them like a shroud. They were stepping into unknown territory, both literally and figuratively. An instinct warned them that the ghosts of Eldoria held secrets best left undisturbed. The air hung thick and still, the only sound the distant gurgling of a hidden stream. Elias, his senses on high alert, pressed himself against the gnarled trunk of a fallen redwood, its bark a tapestry of moss and lichen. Beside him, Corva mirrored his posture, her breathing shallow and quiet as she scanned the forest edge. "They're worse than the stories," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustle of leaves. Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the spectacle unfolding in the clearing below. The sunken city of Eldoria, bathed in the amber glow of the setting sun, had become a canvas for an unsettling juxtaposition. The Valdari, their silver uniforms gleaming, moved with an unnerving efficiency amidst the ruins, their every action a stark counterpoint to the timeless serenity of the place. But it was their machines that truly stole Elias's breath. Towering constructs of metal and light, they hummed with an alien energy that sent shivers down his spine. One, a behemoth with articulated limbs and glowing lenses, lumbered towards a partially collapsed tower, its mechanical arms probing the ancient stonework with an almost surgical precision. "What are they doing?" Corva breathed, her voice a mix of awe and apprehension. "Searching," Elias murmured, his eyes narrowing. He'd spent countless hours exploring the ruins of Eldoria, his fingers tracing the weathered carvings, his imagination weaving stories around the fragments of a lost civilization. To see the Valdari, with their cold efficiency and alien purpose, desecrating the site with their presence filled him with a burning anger. "Jet was right," he continued, his voice hardening with conviction. "They're not content with simply observing. They're here to claim, to conquer." Corva's hand, callous but steady, found his arm, her touch a grounding presence in the swirling vortex of his thoughts. He met her gaze, saw the same mix of fear and resolve reflected in the emerald depths of her eyes. "We need to show them that Eldoria is not theirs for the taking," she said, her voice a low growl. "We need to remind them that the Whispering Woods have teeth." Elias nodded, his jaw set. He unslung his bow, the polished wood a familiar weight in his hand. It was more than just a weapon. It was an extension of himself, a symbol of his people's connection to the forest, to their heritage. "We strike at dusk," he said, his voice low and dangerous as the rustling wind through the trees. "And we make them understand that some places are best left undisturbed." The air hung heavy with the scent of moss and damp earth. Lenara, her fingers tracing the delicate veins of a moon-petal blossom, felt a familiar tightness in her chest. The Whispering Woods, usually a symphony of life, felt muted, shrouded in an unnatural stillness. She'd heard the whispers in the village, seen the fear etched on the faces of her people. The others had arrived, their metal birds casting fleeting shadows against the sun-dappled forest floor. Their presence, a dissonant chord in the harmony of their world, had cast a pall over the spirits of even the most stalwart hunters and gatherers. A low groan, a sound distinctly human, cut through the silence. It came from the direction of the sunken pools, a place of natural beauty nestled within the heart of the Whispering Woods, a place that held particular significance for her. Lenara rose, her movements fluid despite the tremor of unease that ran through her. She'd spent her life tending to the sick and wounded, her knowledge of herbs and healing touch a balm for both physical and emotional wounds. But the others, they were an unknown quantity, their motivations as alien as the metal birds that had scarred the heavens. Her fingers tightened around the worn leather pouch that held her most prized possessions, her grandmother's healing stones, smooth and cool against her palm. They were a tangible connection to her heritage, a source of strength and guidance. With a deep breath, she plunged into the emerald embrace of the forest, her bare feet finding familiar purchase on the forest floor. She found him near the edge of the largest pool, his silver uniform torn and stained, his face contorted in pain. He was younger than she'd expected, barely a man, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. A gash, deep and angry, marred his left leg, the source of the blood that stained the water a diluted crimson. He saw her then, his eyes the color of storm clouds widening in alarm. He made a move as if to rise, to defend himself, but the effort sent a spasm of pain through his body, and he collapsed back onto the mossy ground, a choked gasp escaping his lips. Lenara approached cautiously, her gaze flickering between the wounded stranger and the dense undergrowth that surrounded them. He was unarmed, she noted, his hands trembling, his chest heaving. He was alone, injured, and far from his people. He spoke then, his voice rough with pain, the words tumbling out in a language that was both melodic and utterly incomprehensible. He was pleading for something, his gaze wide and desperate. Lenara took another step closer, extending her hands, palms open, a universal gesture of peace. He flinched but made no further move to resist. His eyes, she realized, held no malice, only pain and a flicker of something akin to fear. She knelt beside him, ignoring the prickle of unease that crawled up her spine. He was an other, one of those who threatened their way of life, their very existence, and yet he was also someone's son, perhaps someone's brother, someone who was loved and missed. He was someone who needed her help. "Peace, little brother," she murmured, her voice a soothing balm in the stillness of the forest. "I will not harm you." His gaze locked onto hers, a flicker of understanding passing between them, a bridge built on shared pain and a common language, the language of compassion. Ignoring the voice in the back of her mind that screamed at her to flee, to raise the alarm, she reached for her pouch, her fingers closing around the smooth stones. He might be an enemy, a harbinger of destruction, but in that moment he was simply a patient, someone who needed her skills, her compassion, someone who, against her better judgment, had awakened a spark of empathy within her. The Temple of Etheria, nestled amidst a cascade of crystal-clear water, had always been a sanctuary, a place where the echoes of the past whispered wisdom to the present. Sunlight, fractured by the relentless torrent, painted rainbows on the smooth, moss-covered stones, each droplet a tiny prism reflecting a kaleidoscope of light. Today, however, the tranquility was shattered, the air thick with the metallic tang of fear and impending violence. Elias crouched behind a weathered statue, its features eroded by time, yet still radiating an aura of watchful serenity. His heart pounded against his ribs, each thump a stark reminder of the chaos unfolding around him. He gripped his bow, its familiar weight a source of comfort in the maelstrom. Below, in the temple's central chamber, the Valdari fanned out, their silver uniforms a stark contrast to the vibrant tapestries adorning the chamber walls. They moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons held ready, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and wary curiosity. Svana, her crimson cape a splash of aggression amidst the muted colors of the temple, barked orders, her voice echoing harshly off the stone walls. "Search every corner. I want every inch of this place examined. The humans who attacked our patrol had to have come from somewhere, and I want to know where." Marius trailed behind her, his usual enthusiasm replaced by a grim frown. He hated this violation of a place that radiated peace and tranquility. The air hummed with a subtle energy, a palpable sense of history that whispered of ancient rituals and a reverence for the natural world. To see it treated with such disregard turned his stomach. "Captain Svana," he began, his voice barely a whisper above the roar of the waterfall. "Are we sure about this? This place, it feels sacred." Svana whirled around, her eyes the color of polished obsidian, flashing dangerously. "This is a nest of vipers, Marius, not a sanctuary," she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "Those savages attacked our men, sabotaged our equipment. We will not tolerate such acts of aggression." Marius opened his mouth to argue, to remind her of Reese's orders to proceed with caution, to prioritize diplomacy over force, but the words died in his throat. He knew with a sinking certainty that Svanna had already made up her mind. A flicker of movement near the chamber entrance caught Elias's eye. Corva, her face a mask of fury, her hand gripping a spear tipped with obsidian, emerged from the shadows. Her eyes met Elias's, a silent message passing between them. The time for stealth was over. Corva's war cry, sharp and piercing as a hawk's scream, shattered the tense silence. She sprang from the shadows, her spear a blur of motion as she slammed into the Valdari formation. The element of surprise, however, was short-lived. Shouts erupted as the Valdari, caught off guard but well-trained, scrambled to respond. Energy blasts lit up the chamber, casting flickering shadows on the ancient walls. The scent of ozone and burning vegetation filled the air, a sharp counterpoint to the sweet fragrance of incense that usually permeated the temple. Elias rose from his hiding place, his bow singing a song of defiance. He loosed arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark with deadly accuracy. He moved with the fluidity of a predator, his knowledge of the terrain, of every hidden nook and cranny, giving him an advantage over the technologically superior Valdari. The battle raged, a chaotic dance of desperation and fury. The humans, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with the ferocity of those defending their very heart, their home. But the Valdari, their initial shock replaced by cold determination, pressed their attack, their energy weapons spitting fire, their movements precise and deadly. A cry of anguish tore through the chaos, stopping Elias in his tracks. He turned, his blood running cold, to see Linara kneeling beside a fallen figure, her hands glowing with an ethereal light as she tried in vain to staunch the flow of blood. The fallen figure, clad in the silver of the Valdari, was Marius. The echoes of the Valdari weapons fire faded, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. The air, heavy with the scent of ozone and scorched earth, felt suffocating, a physical manifestation of the despair that threatened to engulf Elias. He stared at the scene before him, his mind struggling to reconcile the tranquility of the temple with the carnage that stained its sacred stones. Corva, her face streaked with sweat and dust, stood frozen mid-stride, her spear clattering to the ground, as if the very weight of what had transpired had sapped her usual fire. Linara, her shoulders slumped with defeat, gently lowered Marius's lifeless hand, her face a mask of grief and a profound weariness. The healing glow that usually emanated from her hands flickered and died, as if even her connection to the life force of Etheria itself had been severed by the violence that had unfolded in this sacred place. The remaining Valdari, their ranks thinned, their expressions a mixture of shock and simmering rage, had fallen back, their weapons trained on the small group of humans who had dared to challenge them. Svanna, her crimson cape billowing around her like a shroud, surveyed the scene with a chilling detachment, her eyes, cold and unforgiving, fixed on Elias. "You will pay for this," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that cut through the tense silence. "You will all pay." Elias felt a surge of anger, raw and primal, course through him. He had tried to reason with them, tried to protect what was theirs, but his efforts had been met with violence, with an arrogance that knew no bounds. He had lost friends, comrades in this senseless conflict, and the weight of their sacrifice pressed down on him, fueling his rage. He straightened, squaring his shoulders, the weight of leadership settling upon him, heavy and inescapable. He might not have sought this role, but he would not shy away from it. He was a hunter, a protector, and the Whispering Woods, his home, his sanctuary, were under threat. "They attacked our sacred place," he said, his voice ringing out with a newfound authority, each word imbued with the grief and fury that burned in his heart. He met the gazes of his fellow villagers, saw the fear reflected in their eyes, but also a glimmer of hope, of defiance. "They came to our home, desecrated our history, and spilled innocent blood on sacred ground," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "We will not let their transgression go unpunished. We will fight. We will defend our home. We will honor the memory of those we have lost." A murmur, hesitant at first, then swelling into a roar of defiance, rippled through the assembled villagers. They had always been a people of peace, living in harmony with the natural world, but even the most gentle creature would fight when cornered, when its very existence was threatened. Elias raised his bow, the polished wood glinting in the dappled sunlight filtering through the temple's shattered roof. He fitted an arrow, its obsidian tip glinting ominously. "For Etheria he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber, a rallying cry that resonated with the ancient spirit of the whispering woods, a promise whispered on the wind. And as the villagers, their faces a mixture of fear and fierce determination, took up their own weapons, their makeshift spears and bows a testament to their ingenuity and their unwavering resolve, Elias knew, with a certainty that transcended fear, that the battle for Etheria had just begun. The fight for their home, their very way of life, would be long and arduous, but they would face it together, united in their grief, their anger, and their unwavering love for the land that had nurtured them for generations. The air in the command center crackled with a tension thicker than the humid Etheria air filtering through the ventilation system. Reese paced the metallic floor, the rhythmic click of his boots the only sound in the otherwise silent room. The holographic display, still displaying the aftermath of the temple clash, cast an eerie blue glow across his face, highlighting the worry lines etched around his eyes. He'd spent his career seeking knowledge, pursuing understanding, yet, facing the carnage at the temple, the raw grief etched on Lenara's usually serene features as she'd tended to Marius, Reese felt a chilling sense of ignorance. How could his quest for discovery have led to this, to the cold, lifeless eyes of a promising young engineer under his command? Svana stood ramrod straight beside the command console, her face an impassive mask, her silence somehow louder than the accusations Reese knew simmered within her. He stopped pacing, confronting her. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" His voice, usually calm and measured, shook with barely suppressed rage. "This bloodshed, this needless escalation—" "They drew first blood, Reese." Svana's voice was ice, each word a carefully aimed shard. "Did you expect them to simply surrender their home with a smile? This isn't their home, it's a planet ripe for—" Reese stopped, the justification that had seemed so clear just days ago, now tasting like ash in his mouth. Etheria, with its vibrant whispered forests and shimmering waterfalls, was no longer an abstract concept, a scientific endeavor. It was the smell of pine needles clinging to Marius's uniform, the echo of Corva's defiance in the temple chamber, the quiet strength in Lenara's heartbroken touch. "We were supposed to be explorers," Reese whispered, more to himself than to Svana, "not conquerors." The command center door hissed open, breaking the spell. A young communications officer, his face pale beneath his Valdari markings, practically saluted as he approached. "Captain Reese, urgent transmission from the surface. It's Lenara of the humans." Svana snorted, but Reese ignored her. His interest piqued. Lenara, the healer who had tended to Marius with such tenderness even in the midst of battle. What could she possibly want? "On screen," he ordered, his voice regaining some of its usual authority. Lenara's image shimmered into focus. Gone was the serene healer he had witnessed in the temple. Her eyes, normally pools of quiet strength, blazed with a fierce light. "You have until sunrise," her voice, though quiet, resonated with an unwavering conviction, "to vacate the sunken city. Leave our sacred ground or face the consequences." Before Reese could respond, Svana stepped forward, her hands slamming down on the console, her face a mask of cold fury. "You dare make demands after what you did?" she spat, her voice laced with venom. "After you murdered our people?" Lenara met Svana's gaze, unflinching. "We did not start this war," she stated, her voice low but unwavering. "But we will finish it. We are the protectors of this land, and we will not hesitate to defend it, even if it means spilling more blood." The screen flickered, then went dark, leaving Reese alone with the echoing silence and the weight of a decision that could tip the scales between fragile peace and utter destruction. He looked at Svana, at the cold fury radiating from her, then back at the empty screen where Lenara's image had resided moments ago. He had a choice to make, one that would define not just his mission, but perhaps the fate of two worlds. The Whispering Woods had always been Elias's sanctuary, a comforting embrace of rustling leaves and damp earth. Now it felt like a vice, slowly constricting around him with each heavy step. Gone was the youthful spring in his stride, replaced by the measured, determined tread of a predator stalking its prey. Grim purpose hardened his gaze, etched lines of worry onto his youthful face. The air, normally fragrant with pine needles and loam, was acrid, the metallic tang of ozone stinging his nostrils. Underneath it all lingered the faint but unmistakable scent of blood, a coppery taste clinging to the back of his throat. It was a taste he'd come to know well in these dark times. Pushing aside a curtain of bioluminescent vines, their usually vibrant glow dimmed as if mirroring the dread that coiled in his gut. Elias entered the clearing. A hastily built fire crackled in the center, casting flickering shadows on the faces of his people. Corva, her usually lively features drawn and pale, met his gaze with a curt nod. "They're close," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the whisper of the wind through the trees. The scouts confirmed it. A full battalion, marching on the Sunstone Grove. "We have until nightfall." Though expected, the news struck him with the force of a blow. The Sunstone Grove, the very heart of their people, the source of their power. Losing it was unthinkable, a painful knot tightening in his chest. Firelight danced across the faces of the assembled villagers, reflecting the fear that flickered in their eyes. Fear for themselves, for their families, for the fate of their people. He saw it etched on the face of the seasoned hunters, their hands never far from their weapons, and in the eyes of the young mothers, clutching their children close as if to shield them from the coming storm. But beneath the fear, Elias also saw something else. A stubborn glint of defiance, a steely resolve that hardened their eyes and squared their shoulders. It was the unyielding spirit of a people backed against the wall, a people who had survived against impossible odds for generations. His fingers tightened around the familiar comfort of his spear haft, the polished wood smooth against his calloused palm. The weight of it grounded him, a physical reminder of his duty. There was no room for false hope, for comforting lies. Their situation was dire, their enemy ruthless and technologically superior. But they would fight. They had to. "They come to take what is ours," Elias stated, his voice low and steady, cutting through the silence like a blade. "They come to desecrate our home, to bleed our forest dry for their own greed." He met the gaze of each villager, his own unwavering jaw set in a mask of granite. "But we are the children of the Whispering Woods," he continued, his voice rising, imbued with the raw power of his conviction. "We know her secrets, her strength flows through our veins. We will make them pay for every inch of ground, for every drop of blood spilled on our sacred land." His words echoed in the clearing, a rallying cry against the encroaching darkness. Fear remained, a constant companion, but alongside it now burned a fierce, unwavering resolve. They were outmatched, outgunned, but not out of hope. As Elias looked out at the faces illuminated by the firelight, he saw it reflected in their eyes, the shared fire of defiance. The invaders would learn a brutal lesson. The Whispering Woods and her children were not easily defeated. They would fight with the fury of a cornered animal, the desperation of a people fighting for their very existence. The rising sun, a fiery orb cresting the horizon, painted the dew-kissed leaves with hues of gold and crimson. But the beauty of the dawn did little to soothe the turmoil in Rise's chest. He stood at the viewport of the Valdari Command Center, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat that raged within him. Below, the sunken city of Eldoria, once majestic even in its ruin, now bore the scars of their conflict. Sleep had been a fickle lover, offering glimpses of peace only to be ripped away by the chilling memory of Linara's ultimatum and the echo of Svanna's fury. The weight of his decision pressed upon him like Etheria's gravity itself, heavy and inescapable. Behind him, the command center hummed with a nervous energy. He could feel the gaze of his crew on his back, their usual eagerness replaced by a tense uncertainty. They, like him, had come seeking a new beginning, a chance to write their names on the pristine canvas of an untouched world. Instead, they found themselves embroiled in a conflict that threatened to consume them all. He had spent his life seeking knowledge, believing in the power of reason and understanding. But what good were star charts and sensor readings when faced with the raw, primal fury of a people defending their home? A soft chime broke through his thoughts. A message relayed from the surface blinked on his console. It was Linara, her image flickering into focus, but her usual serene mask was gone, replaced by a weariness that mirrored his own. "We are waiting," she said, her voice devoid of malice, yet carrying the weight of an entire people's sorrow. "Will you choose destruction, or will you listen?" He had a choice to make, one that could forge a new path or shatter the fragile hope for peace. He glanced back at his crew, saw the apprehension etched on their faces, the silent plea for guidance. Turning back to Lenara's image, he spoke, his voice rough with fatigue yet firm with conviction. "Meet me. At the Sunstone Grove, unarmed. Just you and me." The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words and the weight of two worlds hanging in the balance. Finally, Lenara nodded, a flicker of cautious hope momentarily breaking through the weariness in her eyes. "We will be there," she said. Then the screen went dark. The journey to the Sunstone Grove was fraught with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of an unseen creature sent shivers down Rhys's spine. He was stepping into the unknown, into the heart of a world that was both beautiful and fiercely protective. He found Lenara waiting for him in a clearing bathed in dappled sunlight. Ancient trees, their branches heavy with moss and vines, formed a natural cathedral around them, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. He was alone, unarmed, vulnerable. And for the first time since setting foot on Etheria, he felt a sense of rightness. They stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of their encounter pressing down on them like the ancient trees that surrounded them. Rhys found himself at a loss for words, the eloquent arguments he had prepared dissolving in the face of the forest's quiet wisdom. Finally, Lenara spoke, her voice a low melody that seemed to harmonize with the rustling leaves. "This is our home," she said, her gaze sweeping across the sun-dappled clearing. "We did not choose it for its resources, its strategic value, or its potential for conquest. We chose it because it was broken, and we, the remnants of a people who had known too much destruction, vowed to heal it." She turned to him then, her eyes, usually filled with warmth and compassion, now blazed with a fierceness that startled him. "You came here, Rhys of the Valdari, with your star charts and your sensors, claiming ignorance of our existence. But the Whispering Woods remembers. It remembers the tread of those who came before, those who sought to claim her bounty without understanding her heart." Rhys felt a chill course through him, despite the warmth of the sun on his face. He looked around at the vibrant life that surrounded them, and for the first time he truly saw it. Not through the lens of scientific curiosity or strategic advantage, but with the heart of someone witnessing something precious, something sacred. "We were wrong," he whispered, the words tasting of ashes and regret. "We came here blinded by our own ambition, our own need to claim and control. We did not see you, not truly." He met Lenara's gaze, his own filled with a newfound humility. "You spoke of destruction and listening. I choose to listen now, to you, to this world, to the whispers of the forest that speak of a different way." Lenara studied him, her expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across her face, transforming her features, and Rhys felt a sliver of hope blossom in his chest. "Then let us walk," she said, extending a hand towards him. "And as we walk, let us speak not of conquest and dominion, but of the long, slow work of healing, of the fragile beauty of coexistence, of the stories we will tell, not just of our differences, but of the common ground we found amidst the whispering trees." And as Rhys reached out, his hand meeting hers in a gesture older than language, older than their two species, the sun, breaking through the canopy of leaves, painted the forest floor with a mosaic of light and shadow, a testament to the fragile beauty of a new beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with the echoes of past mistakes and the potential for future missteps. But as they walked into the heart of the Whispering Woods, two figures silhouetted against the rising sun, they carried with them the seeds of understanding, a fragile hope that bloomed with the promise of a different future, one whispered on the wind, carried on the rustling leaves, a testament to the enduring power of empathy in a universe yearning for connection.